I used to work at a hotel in a small town that had recently been devastated by a hurricane. The storm caused significant damage, forcing many residents to leave their homes. The hotel, located about a 20-minute walk from my house, was a modest bed and breakfast style place. We served the usual breakfast items: scrambled eggs, sausages, and cereals. For a brief time after the hurricane, the hotel was busy with displaced residents, but things eventually became eerily quiet, quieter than they had ever been before. I worked the night shift from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., after which another employee would take over until morning. At the time, only 9 rooms were occupied, so it wasn't unusual to go an entire shift without interacting with anyone. There was a small employee break room in the back with a coffee machine, a fridge, a table, and a couple of chairs. Most of my nights were spent there, with the occasional interruption from the front desk bell when guests needed assistance. One night, while I was in the break room, I heard a deep voice calling out from the lobby, repeatedly saying, "Hello." I got up and went to the front desk, where I saw a man standing on the other side of the glass barrier. The barrier had an opening at the bottom to pass items through. He said he needed extra towels, so I grabbed a few and slid them under the glass. He snatched them aggressively, gave me a strange look, and walked toward the hallway leading to the rooms. Something about him felt off. I sat back down at the desk and watched him on the security monitor. He wandered down the hallway, looking around as if searching for something. Then, to my shock, he started rubbing the towels on his face in a bizarre manner. I muttered to myself, "What the hell?" before seeing him step into the elevator. Feeling unsettled, I went back to the break room to shake it off. About 10 minutes later, I heard the same voice again in the lobby. The man was back, standing at the front desk. He loudly complained that his key card wasn't working. When I asked for his room number, he gave me something like 2C, a combination of numbers and letters. Our rooms were numbered, not lettered, so I knew he was lying. I told him as much, and that's when things took a terrifying turn. He slammed the towels on the floor, tilted his head, and smiled. A chilling, menacing smile. He pressed his face against the glass and whispered, "I'm going to kill you." He repeated it, louder each time until he was practically screaming. Panicking, I yelled back, "I'm calling the police," and picked up the phone to dial 911. He stood there, mockingly mimicking me as I described the situation to the dispatcher. Then, without warning, he turned and walked out of the building, disappearing into the night. I informed the dispatcher that he had left and decided not to have an officer come out, thinking the ordeal was over. For the rest of my shift, I stayed in the lobby, too rattled to return to the break room. At 2 a.m., my relief arrived, and I clocked out to walk home. The night was cold, and I regretted not bringing a heavier jacket. As I walked through the parking lot, I heard a voice from the bushes lining the building. I couldn't make out what it said, but I didn't stop to find out. I quickened my pace, leaving the hotel behind. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the rhythm of my footsteps, until I heard another set of footsteps behind me. They were fast, almost like someone was running on their tiptoes. I turned around, and the footsteps stopped. There was a parked car nearby, and I had a sinking feeling someone was hiding behind it. Then I heard a familiar voice, soft and chilling, say, "I'm going to kill you." It was him. I looked around desperately, trying to decide what to do. Running wasn't an option. I wasn't fast enough in my work shoes. The nearest house had a light on upstairs, so I bolted toward it, screaming for help. I rang the doorbell frantically, but before anyone answered, the man grabbed me from behind and started choking me. He whispered in my ear, "Die." I thought it was the end. My vision blurred, and I felt myself slipping away. Then, suddenly, the door flew open, and a man stepped out, shouting, "Hey!" The attacker released me and ran off into the darkness. The homeowner helped me inside, gave me water, and called the police. I recounted the entire horrifying ordeal to the officers when they arrived. They reviewed the hotel's CCTV footage and tried to track the man down. A few days later, I was called to the station to view a lineup of suspects. My heart pounded as I examined the faces, but I couldn't positively identify anyone. To this day, I wonder if I made a mistake and let a dangerous man walk free. The experience still haunts me, and I've never felt completely safe since that night. I recently began my career as a police officer, and being new to the force, I was assigned to the overnight shifts. 3 12-hour shifts a week can be grueling, especially since the most unsettling incidents often happen at night. Even though I'm still in my first year on the job, I have an unforgettable story to share. It was around 3 a.m., and I was patrolling my usual route. The roads were eerily quiet, with no cars in sight. Much of my route wound through heavily wooded areas, making the darkness feel even more oppressive. One of the few well-lit streets in the area was Madison Avenue, lined with shops and streetlights. At this hour, every store was closed, so it was mostly uneventful. As I turned onto Madison Avenue, something caught my eye. Driving past a small bakery I frequent during the day, I noticed that its lights were on. This was strange since the bakery always closed by 6 p.m. on weekdays. I stopped the patrol car abruptly and reversed back to the parking lot to take a closer look. I parked by the curb and stepped out, finding the door to the bakery unlocked. Hesitant but alert, I pushed the door open and called out the owner's name. My voice echoed unnervingly through the empty shop. The thought of someone being inside made my skin crawl. After a few moments of silence, I heard a muffled sound coming from the back of the store. Following the noise, I found a door leading to a staircase that descended into darkness. I hadn't realized the bakery had a basement. My duty was to investigate, so I drew my flashlight and cautiously made my way down the concrete steps. The basement was pitch black, and my flashlight's narrow beam barely lit the space. The strange noise grew louder as I approached what appeared to be a storage area. It was an odd, unsettling sound, almost like a mix of mechanical interference and something organic, a noise I can only describe as otherworldly. I stepped into a small back room, my senses on high alert. The sound erupted again, sharper this time, coming from an air vent in the corner. Shining my flashlight into the vent didn't reveal anything. The grill blocked most of the light. I pressed my ear against it and froze. From within, I could hear the faint but unmistakable sound of breathing. My pulse quickened as I tried to angle the flashlight differently, pressing one eye close to the vent. For a fleeting moment, the light hit just right, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. A gloved hand inches from my face. I instinctively drew my firearm and ordered whoever was in the vent to come out. There was no response, only the sound of someone shuffling deeper into the vent system. Unable to open the vent grill, I listened helplessly as the noises faded. I couldn't determine where the vent led or how someone could have entered it in the first place. Questions raced through my mind. Who was this person? How did they get in? And most disturbingly, what was that bizarre sound? I called for backup, and within minutes, several officers arrived. We thoroughly searched the premises and contacted the owner, who arrived to assist us. Despite our efforts, we found no signs of forced entry. Every vent was securely fastened, and every window was intact. It was as if whoever had been in the vent had vanished without a trace. The investigation wrapped up by dawn, leaving us with more questions than answers. But what lingers with me most isn't just the sight of the gloved hand. It's the haunting, unexplainable sound that echoed through the bakery that night. I still wonder if we missed something or if it was better left undiscovered. I used to work at a bowling alley, and one night, after finishing up the closing duties, I turned off all the lights and was just about to leave. It had been a long shift, and the silence of the empty building was oddly comforting, though a little eerie. Just as I grabbed my keys and headed toward the door, I noticed that one of the lanes had turned on. The thing is, those lanes don't turn on by themselves. There's a manual switch located in the back, behind the curtain near the pin setters. I stood there for a moment, confused and trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe I'd forgotten to turn it off? That's what I told myself. Anyway, I turned the lane lights back on to illuminate the area and started walking toward the back to investigate. As I moved closer to the curtain, I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The place was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every little sound stand out. My footsteps echoed faintly, and I could hear the hum of the few machines that were still powered down for the night. When I reached the curtain, just as I was about to pull it aside and step into the back area, the lane suddenly shut off again. I froze mid-step, my heart started pounding, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't like the power had flickered or anything. It had been a deliberate shutoff, the same way it'd look if someone flipped the switch. But I hadn't touched anything yet, and as far as I knew, there was no one else in the building. "Hello? Is anyone back there?" I called out, my voice sounding a little shaky even to me. There was no response. I waited for what felt like an eternity, straining my ears for any sound, footsteps, a rustle, anything. But all I heard was the low hum of the pinsetters and the faint creaks of the old building settling. I started to second-guess myself. Could it have been an electrical glitch? Maybe something wrong with the wiring? But then again, I'd worked there long enough to know that the switches in the back weren't prone to malfunctioning, and they definitely didn't flip on and off by themselves. Still, I wasn't about to go back there alone to find out. The uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach was enough to keep me from pushing my luck. I turned off the lane lights again, made sure everything else was locked up, and left for the night. The whole way home, I kept replaying the incident in my head, trying to make sense of it. The next day, I told my boss what had happened, hoping they might have an explanation or at least believe me. But without cameras to back me up, they just laughed it off, saying I must have been tired or imagining things. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. I still wish we'd had cameras installed back then, not just to prove I wasn't crazy, but to maybe capture whatever it was that turned that lane on and off. It's one of those moments that sticks with you, a story I've told a few times over the years, but I still get chills thinking about it.